Hello, welcome once again, friends, to yet another Whisky Me live tasting. It seems like only yesterday we were doing a tasting. Oh wait, we were. If you are one of our World Whisky subscribers, you may well have tuned into the Machir tasting yesterday, which was a lot of fun. And I'm sure that our Kilchoman tasting today is going to be just as much fun. I will continue to verbally tread water just for another 30 seconds while we allow everyone to enter the room. If you feel the need to comment and ask any questions that you feel pertinent to tonight's tasting. But I have a question for you before we get started, and you can chuck it in the comments and I'll have a proper look afterwards. Do you like doing this tasting at 8 p.m. or would you prefer to do it at 7 p.m. or 7:30 or 8:30? It was a number that we just kind of made up when we started doing these live tastings, and it occurred to us that it might not be the most convenient time. So we can have somewhat of a vote if you like, because we're flexible. If everyone's happy with 8, we'll continue to do 8, but we can shift the time if there's enough people wishing to do that. Anyway, chuck it in the comments, and while you do that, I will introduce tonight's guest, which is the brand manager of Kilchoman, Antea Allegro. Hello.
Hello, Tristan. How are you?
I screwed up your name slightly then.
That's all right.
I do apologise.
It's not the important bit of tonight, I would say.
Well, it's important to me, and I messed it up. I'm going to have another crack at it before the end of our chat, and I will get it right, I promise.
No problem.
Thanks so much for joining us for this live tasting. Really appreciate you taking the time.
No, it's great to be here, and I love Whisky Me, so it's a great opportunity to show my face around as well and to try some whiskey live with you.
Yeah, for sure. Good stuff. So I only just found out you're a relative newcomer to Kilchoman. Well, as an employee, I'm sure you know the brand for years, but you started during COVID, right? Back in September.
I did, yeah. So it's just been a few months. Well, we're coming to a year in a couple of months. But yes, I've changed job during lockdowns, and I've always been very passionate about Kilchoman and what they do. So it was, a great surprise for me to join the team and to be a bit more involved with their whiskey rather than just drinking them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It must just be a dream job. I mean, to be involved in such a way with a kind of new, exciting distillery that's doing cool things on an island that is so kind of intrinsically linked to whiskey and its history. I just think that's, as someone, wanting to work in whiskey and wanting to be a part of what a brand is doing and how that story plays out, it just sounds perfect to me.
It really does, yeah. It's a fantastic job. Sometimes I still pinch myself and am I here? Am I doing this job for real? But yes, it's been an incredible 10 months so far. And the team I work with is the sales and marketing team, which are Anthony Swill's sons, which is the managing director and founder of the distillery. So we have a very close link to what's happening in production, the new experiments he's been up to. And sometimes he keeps it hidden, but we always find out what he's up and what sort of casks he purchased or new fermentation timings or yeast and stuff like that. So it's always fun. There's never a dull day, and it's incredible since the fact that as a small distillery, we can really showcase the brand through our core range and limited releases as well as quite a bit of single cask. So it's still a small production because we're the smallest distillery on Islay, even though we have expanded back in 2019 with new still house and a new mounting floor as well. So we basically doubled production. But since 2005, the distillery has really came a long way. And Anthony is definitely still the pillar, all of it. And he's still running, operation as a master blender and experimenting as much as he could. So it's great.
Yeah, I was saying just before we went live, I've been lucky enough to visit twice, and once was, not that long after the distillery came online. Well, I don't know, it would have been sometime around 2005, 2006, I think. So a little way into the story of Kilchoman, and then again, I think it was 2019. I think the expansion was done by that point, or very nearly done, and it felt like visiting a different distillery, compared to the one that I went to before. But nonetheless, it's still a small operation, right? I mean, can you give some sort of context, maybe in terms of production figures or cases or whatever, of the size of Kilchoman compared to some of the other distilleries on Islay?
Absolutely. So at the moment, well, this year, for example, we're aiming to produce about 450,000 litres of alcohol, which is probably what big distilleries like Kalila do in a matter of 3 to 4 weeks. So it's a very, very small operation. So when we started back in 2005, we were filling about 6 casks a week, which is very small considering, a distillery based on Islay with the request of peated whiskey that you get around the world. So it was quite of an easy choice when Anthony saw the all the sales going up on this category to start to expand the distillery and have a new still house as well as a malting floor, because it was really important to get the whiskey out there rather than being on a location, and just to limit the availability of our products such as like Machir and egg. So yeah, they came a long way. But just to give you a reference, in 2000 until 2009, 2010, they were still bottling the whiskey with teapots. So it was such a small operation that they actually didn't need, a massive bottling line. But we have it now, so don't worry. This one has not been bottled with teapots.
That's so funny. That's such a British thing. Not so much Scottish as English, but yeah, that's hilarious. Bottling with teapots. Can you kind of paint a picture of what the distillery is like now and what it was? I mean, it's on a farm, right? And that's an important component of the brand story.
It is on a farm. So in 2005, when Anthony, well, actually 2002, when he was looking for a location for the distillery, he was looking around Islay, and Rockside Farm came up as, a suitable location. And it was actually perfect because Rockside is based on very fertile grounds for growing malt. And this is something that he always wanted to do. He always wanted to have a distillery that had its own malt produced on site, as well as malting floor, and basically do a barley to bottle. So every single step of the process done on site. At the beginning, the distillery was set up in the existing building of the farm, so it was very restricted to what was around it. But in 2015, they purchased the farm side of things, and they're now one big operation. So that allowed us not only to start to experiment with malt and have about 10 acres that every single year we turn with a different experimental malt, but also to get more space around the farm in terms of the malting floor, warehousing, and much, much more. Even like visitor center now has been completely redone, and it just gives a completely different look and a completely different feel to the distillery. And we're such a destination because you can see everything done in the one location, from the barley growing when you're coming in to go to the parking lot at the distillery, to the bottling side of things. And the magic thing is the whiskey never leaves Islay during that. So it's great to see how a continuous process has brought us to have that with 100% Islay, which it's obviously the name to the whiskey that we produce as barley to bottle.
Yeah, yeah. So you've got this expression 100% Islay, where everything is grown, well, all the way through from the barley on the farm grown to the malting on your own malting floor, all the way through to maturation and bottling. Everything occurs on Islay, correct?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
initially that was the plan, just to have 100% Islay as our unique expression. But ultimately, in late 2005, early 2006, there were some issues with production. So the kiln got caught fire, and they found themselves,
Not fire, but not in the right way.
No. So they found themselves looking for malt to continue production, and that led them to approach Port Ellen malting and to try their 50 ppm recipe, which is the heavily peated, which other distillery use. And with the processes at Kilchoman, we found that it was extremely light, very pleasant, and it really suits what we were doing already with 100% Islay. Obviously, more peated because the 100% Islay range is only lightly peated at 20 ppm. But it's a great way to compare the two different style of spirits that we produce there. So yeah, from an accident and a bit of math gone wrong, we had what we now call Machir and Sanig, and some of the other whiskies in the range as well. Most of our limited releases as well are based on the 50 ppm malt.
Yeah, so just for anyone that's not clear on that, it's probably worth just clarifying that Islay has its own maltings at Port Ellen, which is the site of the former Port Ellen Distillery, which quite famously closed down, and then you have to pay a lot of money to buy bottles of it, but they're reopening it. Anyway, there's a malting there that produces smoky peated malt and supplies a lot of the distilleries on Islay. So, I mean, this malting's, it's not far away. I mean, it's the other side of the island to Kilchoman, isn't it? But it's not that far away. It's still pretty local. And as you say, that same grade of peated malt appears in other whiskies and other distilleries around the island. But of course, this is where it gets interesting, because you put it through quite a small still like you guys have got. Small but quite tall, if I remember correctly. So
yeah, they are quite tall.
Yeah, as opposed to dumpier stills at one of the other distilleries, like Lagavulin, for example, and and then you go through the different maturation profiles, different use of casks, and I guess pretty similar climatic conditions. It's kind of just windy everywhere. And then you see what comes out the other end, and that's it's one of the fascinating things about whiskey, I think, is to see how each distillery and the hand of each distiller and blender results in a slightly different expression.
Absolutely.
And you've got, I really think with Kilchoman, I was writing about it for the blog post that we put on the Whisky Me website for all of our members. It's sort of becoming a modern classic, really. I think Machir Bay, although it's not been around that long.
It isn't.
Yeah, it's just a whiskey that feels like it's been around for ages now. It's a staple of any decent whiskey back bar. You need to have it, and even the bottle and the shape and the blue label and everything is somewhat becoming iconic in my mind. And it says a lot about the whiskey. I think that it's got its own identity and its own unique take on the Islay style.
Exactly. And that's what Anthony wanted to do right away when setting up the distillery. He was helped by Jim Swan. He was his mentor at the time. And the idea around it was obviously having this, farm side of things and, growing our own malt. But at the same time, as an independent distillery, running a distillery is really expensive. And the idea of maturing whiskey for 10, 15, 20 years before releasing it, it was impossible at the time due to the funds. So to do that, just to speed up the process, they looked at things with a different kind of approach. So one of the key things in the production of Kilchoman is to make sure that we have a long fermentation. It's almost double the industry standard. So we go for about 85 hours on average, which obviously leads to a lighter sort of wash with loads of floral notes, and it doesn't have that many peat notes anymore. And then through our still, as you said, they are quite small stills. I mean, our wash still is about 3,000 litres, and our spirit still, which has a bit of an odd shape, is about 1,700 litres. So that really allows for a lot of copper contact, and being so tall, obviously we're only collecting the lighter alcohols, those ones that are giving, you know, the profile to our whiskey, being citrus, not heavily smoked, and it doesn't have that sort of waxy finish sort of note. So the aid of a reflux bulb on the spirit still really helps with distillation and only collecting this lighter alcohol and esters, which we really need for our 3, 4, and 5 years old that, you know, we are able to use in any sort of release, because ultimately they're ready. But the key other thing is obviously the maturation. So it happens on the island, and we do have about 4 warehouses at the moment. Our stock is about 12,000 casks. So it's not massive, and that gives you an end why we need to use the younger spirits and why we don't have that much from older years. At the same time, the use of casks that have been previously used by one distillery, for example, in terms of bourbon barrels, we use Buffalo Trace in Kentucky as our supplier, and we select their high-end range of casks, which are most active. And to do that, to preserve those sort of flavor, we get them shipped full to the distillery, obviously not full of alcohol, but full in terms of the shape.
That would be funny
that would be
if
great.
they all arrived full of bourbon and you're like, oh, what should we do with this?
Very expensive delivery though. But that really helps keeping those flavor alive and preventing the food from drying and, you know, any sort of damage as well. So it gets almost like a kickstart to the maturation, and it's one of the reasons why Machir Bay is a non-age statement, but it does have an older entity than what it is. And in terms of our sherry cask, because Machir Bay is not only matured in bourbon barrels, we do the same with Miguel Martin, which is used by other distilleries such as Glenfarclas, for example, where they base, you know, most of their, or actually all their production on sherry cask. So it's a very good supplier, and we've managed to get very active cask, especially for our Sanig expression that I know you obviously had back in the days with Whisky B, and it's now a lot darker. It does have the same entity, the same profile, but obviously that has been elevated by the flavor, by the activeness of the new cask that we're getting. So we're very lucky, and definitely the input that Jim Swan had in the first years has really helped to get to the stage of having, you know, a good average 5 years old that is enjoyable, it's light, it's floral, and then it's fruity, and it doesn't have any super peaty or overly oily notes at this stage.
Yeah, I mean, I've got to say, looking back at it now, you know, before Kilchoman came along, there was a real stigma attached to, well, really, malt whiskies, anything under the age of about 10 years old, I would say. Now, of course, new distilleries sort of need to release something, you know, younger than that by necessity, because there's really no kind of business in waiting around 12 years. I do know of a couple of distilleries opening that do intend on doing that, but you need to have very, very deep pockets to be able to back something like that. So, you know, you kind of have to release something younger. But I think really Kilchoman was one of the sort of like is proof that you could release great whiskey at this younger age, non-age statement, or rumored to be 3 to 5 to 6 years old, whatever, and it will still taste good. And now what we've seen since is, of course, other new distilleries come along and release young whiskey. We're also seeing old distilleries releasing younger whiskies as well. And I mean, non-age statement itself has really kicked off in the last 10 years. But we're seeing more and more, like, real kind of stalwarts of the malt whiskey world releasing 7-year-old, 8-year-old, 9-year-old expressions, because and now a market has been created for these younger whiskies. And we realize that it's not all just about maturation and time in cask, but actually just as important, if not more important, is distillery character, and actually getting the taste of what that distillery is making. And of course, the further back in time you go with that, the more of that distillery character you get.
Absolutely, yeah, that's very true. I remember the first time that I came across Kilchoman, and I was working for an independent bottler. We don't usually do independent bottlings, by the way, so it was a rarity, and it was stating that it was a 3 years old cask they bottled at the time. So I came across it and I thought, this is young. Why is it being bottled this young? It must have been something that has fallen through the tasting panel. But actually, I've opened that bottle and I've realized that didn't need any more time in the cask. It was perfectly ready, and I remember the peach note coming through, the very creamy palate finish that it had, and I was completely astonished that much that I used that whiskey in every single one of the tastings that I've done for about 2 months, and nobody could touch those bottles from me. So I think that at this stage now, and with the openness of the distillery as well, to tell what's in the batting that made Machir Bay or Saneg, we've managed to come a long way. And the following that also we had was really understanding, as the first independent distillery on Islay after 124 years. That was a big change, and they understood the need of, and actually they wanted to try the whiskey. They wanted to see what Kilchoman was all about. And since releasing the spring winter editions that we've done until 2012, when we started bottling Machir Bay, they were all astonished by the flavor profile. And it is something that it really sticks with our new make. And it's something that Anthony always says about, not wanting to sell the new make, because it's so good. It's so full of flavor. It's very balanced. People that try it want to buy a bottle of it, which is very unusual. So that really shines through across all of the range and all of the different whiskey that we bottle. He has an eye to keep this flavors alive across full maturation and different battings as well. So we've done loads of different full maturation, which is really into, and it's something that has always been committed to do. And even in those, you always have that sort of citrusy, floral, herbal, and lightly smoked notes that are coming through. It never takes over the sort of maturation that that sort of whiskey has gone through. So it's great.
What's the oldest age statement expression you've put out?
We did 2010 vintage just about 2 years ago, and after that, the oldest were probably towards the Lochgorm and the under percentile. So the youngest whiskey was about 9 years old.
Yeah, so you're in around 9 years old, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but we always say, if there's a percentage of older whiskey in there that, might be a 13, 14 years old. We always wanted to share, because obviously that would affect the overall batting and the overall bottling as well.
Yeah. Cool. Right, I'm really thirsty now, so let's have a little taste of it. It's been sat there staring at me for 25 minutes.
It's actually a warm day, so I would imagine that quite a few people will be enjoying this whiskey in their garden, you know. So,
And what a good place to do it as well, right? Or on the beach, indeed, where its namesake is. The first time I visited Kilchoman, I think we were booked in pretty early at the distillery to take some photos and have a chat. And for some reason, we got up even earlier than we needed to. I don't know why, because I can guarantee you, hung over from the night before.
you were
Anyway,
overly excited about
yeah,
going to the distillery, probably.
that was it. That was it. Anyway, because we arrived early, we were like, oh well, we've got half an hour to kill or whatever. So we went down to Machir Bay, and I distinctly remember it being freezing cold, blowing an absolute hooey, and we had a quick dram on the beach, just to sort of say we took some pictures, and then back in the car, and then over to the distillery. I mean, it's the bay is what, like 5 or 10 minutes away from the distillery?
Oh
right?
yeah, just a couple of minutes away by car, 5 minutes by walk, and yeah, it's beautiful. Considering that it's the only distillery that is not on the seaside, that it's it's really rewarding to have. It's almost like a hideaway from everybody else.
Yeah, I never thought about it like that. Well, I mean, everything's pretty close to the sea on Isla, of course, but yeah, you're the only one that's not looking out over the sea.
Yeah, exactly. We look at the malt fields, which is as rewarding.
For sure.
But yeah, no, the distillery is about 4 miles from Bruladec, so it's up in mainland, and it's between Loch Gorm and Machir Bay, which Loch Gorm is the place obviously we source the peat for 100% Isla. So we remain very local, very committed to staying local. Slange.
So yeah, talk us through this one. Any sort of opinions you've got, and then obviously everyone that's at home listening, if you have any tasting notes you'd like to share, then by all means stick them in the comments.
Absolutely, we'll love to hear. So this one, as I said before, is a 50 ppm malt, and it's 46% alcohol. The reason for being 46% is because all our whiskies are non-chill filtered. So we need to maintain that sort of level of alcohol to make sure that there's no haziness. In addition to that, we don't add any colouring to the whiskey. So what it comes through your glass, it's all given by the caramelization of the wood and what the bourbon barrels in this case had to give to the whiskey. But it's not just bourbon barrel, as I said before. So this whiskey is a batting of 90% bourbon mature whiskey and a 10% of sherry matured. We tend to use first fill maturation, and just the 10% of the sherry, sorry, as well is first fill, just to make it even more powerful and have those lovely vanilla notes layered with the sherry cask, which gives that nice cooked fruit, the spiciness as well. It's for the age, it's very refined. It doesn't have any sort of spikes of any particular flavor. It's very well balanced. And this is, as we said before, given by obviously the spirit type that we have. If we're talking about, a heavily peated malt, most people will be like, might be a bit too much, but actually this one really shows that it doesn't have to be linked to the ppm that the malt had in the first place.
Yeah, for sure. It doesn't, for me, and I'm jumping ahead to the tasting bit, but it doesn't have that sometimes cloying sootiness that you can get from heavily peated malt. It's a bit more elegant than that. And you mentioned citrus earlier, and we put citrus on one of the tasting notes on the card and on the label. And for me, there is this sort of top note of freshness to it that I think sort of does a lot to douse out some of that smokiness,
Absolutely. And this is also why a lot of people that are looking to approach Islay whiskey and peated whiskey, they might find themselves to get offered a Machir Bay or a Snake to start with, just because you're entering into the heavily peated world, but it's a small entering in it. So it's just a foot in the door rather than, you know, being completely thrown away by the peatiness. And it's incredibly creamy on the palate, which obviously we can fit back to the bourbon. And at the same time, there's a lovely butterscotch note. It's got a very lengthy sort of finish, and it overall really sweet. So I found it really interesting to, to try this one after a few days, because my palates tend to pick up all the time different notes. And today, for example, I get quite a lot of tropical notes, so a lot of peach, a lot of pineapple, a little bit of pear on the nose, which is great.
Yeah, it's so true what you say. It depends on the time of day, where you are, who you're with, what you've eaten previously, what you drank previously. All of those factors play in so much. And this is why, there's no hard and fast tasting notes for these whiskies, because you can taste it on a different day and find something different. I mean, it's not going to be magically transform into a different whiskey, but you will find different aspects of it that appeal and that poke out. And that's part of the fun of it, right?
It really is, yes, absolutely. But one day I find myself drinking, a very sweet whiskey, and the other day I just want to dive into a heavily peated one. But I always find myself with Machir Bay, because it's always a good compromise of the two.
Yeah.
So it's always my safe spot, and obviously I love it, and it's been multi-awarded. So just last week, we've received Best Isla Whisky with the Ultimate Spirit competition. So we're really, really happy. And we have also Machir Bay Cask Strength release that usually goes out during Christmas time. So if you like it, if it's your kind of drink, it is something to look out for. Might be doing that one as well, who knows?
Yeah, maybe not for Richard Cole, because he says this one packs a punch, nice and mellow with a drop of water. So I wouldn't bother with the cask strength, Richard.
Yeah, probably the cask strength will be a bit challenging. But yeah, no.
But I mean, you're right. I mean, he's right. I mean, there is obviously, given that it's young and given the smoke, it's forthright with its flavour, isn't it? I mean, it's certainly not a shrinking violet of a whiskey.
Absolutely.
But it softens up. I think the thing about it is that there's an initial sort of strike of flavour, and then it softens right off quite nicely, and that would be how I would summarise Machir Bay, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And you get this yodid note along with the smokiness that keeps up with the sweetness, which I tend to enjoy myself. And feel free to add a little bit of water as well. A few drops won't hurt. Obviously, it's a 46%, so some people might be used to 40% whiskey. So obviously, if you see a little bit of cloudiness coming up, that's just because we didn't strip out the fattiness and the proteins of this whiskey out of it. So it's obviously the water reacting with that, but it won't affect by any means the final taste of it.
Yeah, for sure. Bob said it's a lovely dessert to my barbecue. I had barbecue as well, and I agree that it follows barbecue. It actually follows barbecue really well, because you've got that, as we keep saying, fruitiness that sort of cuts through like a dessert, but then you've got the smoke, which sort of links it back to the barbecue. It's good barbecue whiskey, actually.
It could really be. And you get this saltiness, and I could see that working really well with savory foods and being, that middle way between your barbecue and your dessert. So yeah.
I like this one. So smoked fruit, yeah. So I mean, I've mentioned this before, and you guys may already know, but the color coding on these pouches does mean something. And yellow indicates fruit, and this sort of greeny tealy color means smoke. So we have 6 different color codes. You can see them on the website. Sometimes you might just get one color code, like Mac Mirror yesterday. The pink is sweet and the yellow is fruit. Okay. Bill, I would agree with you wholeheartedly, because I decided what color this was going to be. And smoked fruit, I think, hitting the nails on the head.
But I think that really, sets the bar for the whiskey and really gives you a very true view of what you're going to approach. There's no surprise there. You know what to expect, especially with this one. there's fruit and there's smokiness. Which way of smoking is obviously depends by the whiskey, but in this case, you'll get herbal smoke and you're doing notes with the salt. So you nailed it.
Yeah, perfect. Good stuff. Right.
Good.
This is for sale on our website, whiskyme.com. And if you use the code WhiskyMeClub10, you get 10% off a bottle, or indeed any bottle. But, you know, given that Antea's here, I suggest you go and buy Kilchoman because it'd just be a bit awkward otherwise.
Well, yeah, enjoy. And Tristan, it was very nice to talk to you. And
no, that was great. Thank you so much for coming on. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in. And we will see you same sort of time next month. Cheers.
Bye, everyone.